Okay, so get this. We're diving into a complicated way of life. ACWOL, for short. And how it might totally change how you think about 5G. You know that thing everyone thinks is just about faster internet? Ready to have your mind blown?
ACOL says 5G is messing with our thoughts.
What's interesting is ACWOL doesn't say 5G is like directly beaming thoughts into our heads or anything. It's more like it suggests our thoughts kind of have a frequency, like they exist within the electromagnetic spectrum.
Hold on, so our thoughts are like little radio waves.
That's simplifying it a bit. But yeah, it's a good way to visualize it. ACWOL gets deep into quantum physics. It proposes thoughts are energy. And that energy can be influenced by other frequencies around us. And guess what? 5G is adding a ton of new frequencies to the mix.
Okay, I see where this is going. So 5G isn't planting thoughts in our heads, but it's like creating more noise on the same frequency our thoughts are on. So it's harder to tell which thoughts are ours and what's just this external chatter. Exactly. And this ties into ACWOL's third tenet, which says thoughts aren't always just from our own minds. We're always receiving and emitting thought energy. We're interacting with a bigger field of consciousness.
Whoa, that's a pretty big idea. So ACWOL is saying some of what we think are our own original thoughts might actually be influenced by this external thought soup that's been amplified by 5G.
Precisely. And ACWOL says this isn't necessarily bad. It just means we need to be more aware of these influences so we can navigate them consciously. Think of it like learning to filter spam from your inbox. You got to recognize what's actually important to you.
Okay, so how do we do that? How do we filter the spam in our thoughts?
Well, ACWOL has a bunch of techniques for what it calls mental hygiene. One of the most interesting is called skipping.
Skipping. That sounds almost too simple.
Yeah, the name might sound basic, but the technique itself is actually pretty nuanced. Imagine you're standing by a river. Thoughts are flowing by like leaves on the current. Instead of grabbing every leaf, you practice letting them float past, observing them without getting caught up. This lets you create a space between your awareness and that constant thought stream.
So it's like we become an observer of our thoughts.
Nice.
Instead of being swept away by them.
Exactly. And this detachment helps us see which thoughts are really ours and which ones might be from outside stuff, like increased electromagnetic activity from 5G.
So skipping is how we reclaim our mental space and become more picky about what we let into our minds. I can already see how valuable that would be today when we're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation.
It's not just information overload either. Imagine you're in a PAX room and everyone's talking about how anxious they are, even if you walked in feeling calm. You might start absorbing that anxious energy and think it's your own.
Like a psychic sponge soaking up the vibes.
Yeah, exactly. And ACWOL suggests 5G is making us all a bit more psychically spongy because it intensifies that energetic exchange. Skipping helps us develop a kind of shield so we can be present without absorbing all that unwanted energy.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So skipping filters our own thoughts and protects us from the thought pollution of 5G. It's about recognizing we have a choice in how we engage with all this energy.
Absolutely. ACWOL is all about empowering us to consciously shape our mental and emotional reality, even as technology changes the rules of the game.
This is fascinating, but I'm wondering, if skipping creates distance from our thoughts, does that mean we're detaching from life itself? Like, how do we stay grounded and present in our daily lives if we're always skipping over our thoughts?
That's a great question. And it leads us to another fascinating concept in ACWOL, intentional resonance.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's unpack that in the next part of our deep dive. All right, so we're back, ready to dig into this intentional resonance thing. Sounds kind of like a superpower, doesn't it?
It kind of is when you think about it. Remember how we were talking about thoughts having a frequency? Well, intentional resonance is all about choosing which frequencies we want to align with.
So instead of being like a psychic sponge, just soaking up whatever's floating around, we can actually choose the thoughts and energies we let into our space.
Precisely. It's like having a mental radio dial. You can tune into fear, anxiety, negativity, or you can choose to tune into joy, love, inspiration.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? Is it just positive thinking?
It's part of it, but intentional resonance goes deeper. It's recognizing that we're energetic beings, always interacting with a field of energy beyond our bodies.
So we're not just individuals, but like nodes in a bigger network, constantly exchanging energy with everything around us.
Exactly, and 5G is amplifying that interconnectedness, for better or worse. That's why ACWOL says it's so important to be aware of those energy exchanges.
Okay, but how do we practice intentional resonance? Like, give me some actual steps.
The first step is awareness. Pay attention to how you feel when you're around certain people, or in certain places, or even when you're looking at certain stuff online. Do you feel energized or drained, inspired or deflated?
So it's like checking our internal barometer, noticing how different things affect our energy level.
Exactly. Once you start to notice that, you can be more intentional about choosing experiences that match your ideal frequency.
So like if I realize watching the news always makes me anxious, maybe I cut back on news and spend more time in nature where I feel calm.
Perfect example. Or if you get sucked into negative conversations, you can consciously change the subject. Or just leave the situation.
It's like we become the DJs of our own mental space, creating a playlist that makes us feel good. I love that. But what about times when we can't just walk away, like being stuck in traffic or dealing with a difficult coworker?
That's where techniques like skipping come in. You can practice observing your thoughts and feelings without getting tangled up in them, even when things are tough.
So skipping is like a mental reset button, helps us detach from the negativity and make space for intentional resonance.
Exactly. By practicing skipping, you create a buffer between you and the outside world, so you can choose how you respond instead of just reacting automatically.
Okay, this is all starting to click, but if we're always curating our energy like this, are we creating an echo chamber where we only see things that confirm our existing beliefs?
That's a good point. And ACWOL definitely says it's important to stay open to new ideas. The goal isn't to build a wall around ourselves, but to develop that awareness so we can engage with the world in a way that's good for us.
So it's not shutting out the world, it's being more aware of how we let it affect us.
Exactly. It's like being a gardener. You choose which seeds you plant, knowing that not everything will thrive in your soil.
I love that. So we're tending the garden of our minds, creating an environment where the thoughts and energies we want can grow.
Exactly. And just like a garden needs fences to keep out pests, our energy needs boundaries too. This brings us to energetic boundaries, another important ACWOL concept.
Okay, I'm seeing the AC wall is like a layer cake. Each layer builds on the last one. Tell me more about these energetic boundaries. How do they fit in?
Imagine your personal energy as like a glowing sphere around you. That sphere is your boundary, and it acts like a filter, letting some energy through, but blocking others.
Okay, I can picture that. But in a world where 5G is amplifying everything, wouldn't it be easier to just build a thick wall and block out all the noise?
It's tempting, but it's not really sustainable, like a physical wall. A rigid energy boundary can make you feel isolated. Healthy boundaries are more like a membrane. They let energy and information flow, but they still protect you from unwanted influences.
So it's about finding that balance between being open and being protected. How do we know when to let stuff in and when to keep it out?
That's where discernment comes in. It's about feeling what's good for your energy and what feels draining.
This feels like a whole new way of being in the world, not just physically, but energetically.
It is. ACWOL is really a framework for conscious living, especially in our complex, interconnected world. It's about recognizing we're energetic beings, interacting with a field of energy much bigger than our bodies. And 5G is making those interactions stronger. So it's more important than ever to understand how to manage our energy and protect our well-being.
This is mind-blowing stuff. It's like we're getting a whole new toolkit for navigating the craziness of modern life. But I'm curious, what does ACWOL say about technology itself? Is it about rejecting all tech? Or is there a way to use these principles in our tech-driven lives?
That's a great question, and it's one we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay, so deep divers, we're back. Ready for the final part of our ACWOL exploration. Figuring out how to live intentionally in this 5G world. So far, we've talked about 5G's energy impact. And learned some cool tools from ACWOL, like skipping intentional resonance and those energetic boundaries. But now I'm wondering, where does technology itself fit in?
Yeah, that's a big question, right? It's easy to think the solution is ditching all our devices and going off the grid.
Haha, right, like some kind of digital detox retreat.
Exactly. But ACWOL isn't about rejecting tech entirely. It's more about recognizing technology as a powerful tool, and like any tool, can be used in good ways or bad ways.
So it's not about becoming a tech-hating hermit. It's about being a more conscious user.
Exactly. It's about asking, is this tech helping me, or am I just serving it?
I think a lot of people feel that, like being controlled by our devices, constantly checking our phones, even when we know we should be doing something else.
That's the perfect example of how tech can hijack our attention and drain our energy. But ACWOL offers a different way of looking at it.
Okay, I'll see.
Instead of seeing tech as the enemy, ACWOL says to see it as an extension of ourselves.
An extension of ourselves. That's interesting.
Think about it. Our phones, our computers, social media, They all let us connect, communicate, create, express ourselves in new ways.
So they're like amplifying our own abilities in a way.
Exactly. But we got to use them consciously and intentionally, not let them use us.
That makes sense. So how do we do that? How do we go from being slaves to tech to being in control?
It starts with awareness, paying attention to how we're using tech and how it makes us feel.
Like noticing how we feel after an hour on social media.
Yeah, exactly. Do you feel energized and inspired or just drained? And blah? Once you notice those little energy shifts, you can start making better choices.
So maybe instead of mindlessly scrolling Instagram, I use that time to listen to a podcast I like or read a book.
Exactly. It's about taking back our time and attention, using tech in ways that match our values and goals.
This reminds me of intentional resonance. Like we can use that same idea to choose how we interact with tech.
Absolutely. It's all connected.
Yeah.
When we're clear about what we want and we're tuned into our energy, we naturally start making choices that are good for us.
So it's not about demonizing tech. It's about using it as a tool for growth and self-discovery.
Exactly. And that's where ACWOL can be so helpful. It gives us a framework for figuring out how to live in this new world, where tech is such a huge part of our lives.
It's like ACWOL is giving us a map for how to thrive in the digital age.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Because it really is a journey. And like any journey, it takes awareness, intention, and being willing to adjust course along the way.
Yeah. And maybe a good pair of hiking boots, metaphorically speaking, of course.
Definitely. Got to be prepared for the terrain.
Yeah.
But with the right tools and mindset, we can navigate it all with grace and ease.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into ACWOL and how it can help us deal with life in the 5G era. We've covered a lot today, from how 5G might affect our energy to those practical techniques like skipping intentional resonance and energetic boundaries. But the biggest takeaway is how we can use ACWOL to become more conscious and intentional with technology. So to wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. ACWOL isn't a set of rules or anything. It's more like a framework for exploring and discovering yourself. It's about giving you the power to create a life that truly reflects you. So I encourage you to take what we've talked about today and start experimenting. See what works for you. Explore the tools and ideas that resonate with you. And most importantly, trust your own intuition. Remember, in this 5G world, the most important connection is the one with yourself.
Well said. And when we nurture that connection, we can navigate everything else with more clarity, purpose, and peace.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into ACWOL. Until next time, stay curious, stay mindful, and keep diving deep.